Hello, my name is Anne Teato, and welcome to episode 96 of the Psychic Matters podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the show and leave a written review because they really do help move the podcast up those important podcast charts. What is new this week? Well, I can finally announce that I have passed my CSNUT exam with the Spiritualists National Union, which means I have been awarded a certificate as a teacher in demonstrating mediumship, and now I have the letters CSNUT after my name, and I could not be prouder because for me this is the result of 8 years of study behind the scenes, and it means I am another step closer to my goal, which is not a secret if you've listened to this podcast before, in that I'm hoping one day to be a tutor at the world-renowned Arthur Findlay College, the world's foremost college for the study of spiritualism and psychic sciences. So what happens next is I wait, because you have to be invited to be assessed as a tutor of tomorrow at the AFC, the Arthur Findlay College, and I have not been invited as yet. And my study isn't over either. In order to become a tutor there, I now have to sit a diploma, which involves another 2 years study and another 3 exams in different subjects. So it's all pretty intense, but you know, if something's worth doing, it's worth doing well. And when I think about it, it's deepening my knowledge. It's making me research topics I perhaps otherwise wouldn't have done. And it's making me very reflective of my own practice and looking very much in depth at how my own mediumship works. So it's all good, it's all excellent. You know, it's exhausting, of course, totally exhausting, but anything worth having is worth striving for, isn't it? So, you know, I'll let you know how it all goes, but I'm thrilled to have passed that exam. Meanwhile, here is some other excellent news. The nominations for the People's Choice Podcast Awards were announced today, and I am delighted to say that we are in the final 10 again for the 3rd year in a row. I'm absolutely thrilled, and it means that once again we're in with a chance of winning that elusive Best Podcast prize in the category of religion and spirituality. So now what we have to do is just sit back and wait for the judges to listen to some of the episodes and see if they love them as much as we do. Huge thanks to you. You took the time to vote for me. You believe in Psychic Matters and the work that we're all doing out there in the world, and that really does mean a lot to me that you took the time to do that. So it's hugely appreciated. Thank you so much. Meanwhile, I've been in the studio with a very special guest indeed. He is someone who is a good friend, a wonderful medium, and he possesses remarkable writing talent, crafting profoundly touching literature. Turn up the volume, make sure your earplugs are in place, and get ready for some beautiful conversations around the gift of mediumship. I am here in the Psychic Matters studio with the one and only Brian Bowles. Brian, welcome to Psychic Matters.
Thank you, Anne. Love you, my friend.
I love you too. I truly love you. And it's so interesting. We've never met in person, have we? But we just fell in love. Friendship, kindness, generosity. It's all there. It's lovely.
True you are. Yeah.
And you, my friend, and you. And we just thought we'd organise a Zoom call together and sort of see where the conversation goes and just have a lovely spiritual chat about all things and see what comes into the mix.
Thanks again for having me. I appreciate it so much. It's good to see you again.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. For those of you that are listening, Brian was on a former episode of the Psychic Matters podcast. He was on episode 27. Honouring Grief, Befriending Death. And we had a fantastic chat on that one as well. So if you haven't listened to it yet, tune in and listen to it after this one. So Brian, tell me something. I know for a fact that you have actually just written yet another book. And tell us about the process of it. Where does it come from? Like, lots of people listening may sort of be thinking, oh, I'll write a book one day. Me, I'm one of those people. I haven't written it yet. And how do you find the time? How do you find the inspiration? How do you put pen to paper? And what's your process for it? Where did it begin?
Well, it's a really great question. So the second book is called Lessons of the Empty Chair. And I had planned on writing another book about mediumship, actually, more directly about mediumship, because a lot of people who read my first book wanted me to give more specifics on how to do mediumship. So that was kind of my intent. And then I realized I can't write that book, but that's another story. But the way it kind of unfolded for me was I'll just get these inspirations at times when my husband and I, at the end of the pandemic, at the beginning of the pandemic, we were supposed to be going to have a lovely holiday with friends in Florida and hanging out at a fun gay resort and all that kind of fun stuff. And John and I were contending with being a clothing optional resort, and our butts had never.
Brilliant.
And maybe that shouldn't happen. So I was very happy. I was like, good, we can't go. I mean, there was a part of me that was like, this is a win for me. So I don't have to go to that horrible place. And yeah, it was just trying to be funny, but it's a little bit the truth. So we turn around. I'll never forget. John turns around. He's like, we can't do the forward because everything fell apart. It was just like over a couple of days, And so John just got this great idea to have us do some historical stops on the kind of see the civil right, places that are historical for American civil rights. Well, not bad. For you the whole story. We went to this place in Oklahoma City. It's a bombing memorial, and it's a heartbreaking place to visit because a lot of people were murdered there, and somebody actually made a bomb out of fertilizer. It's all very dramatic. But anyway, in that experience of being there, I got to hear the docent who talked about her daughter who had died, and she spoke about the survivor tree. And this oak tree that's still there to this day, and they actually use the leaves and they fall and they make impressions with gold and they sell them to the general public. It's a fundraiser for this memorial. And this woman gave me this leaf and I was holding it in my hand, and I just felt this real connection to there's a consequence and we don't learn to love each other when we imagine that people are against us or for us. And we imagine these worlds where you're on my team or you're against my team. There's major consequences for that, aren't there?
Yeah, of course.
So it kind of inspired me to write that day. And I was writing from the moment we left there for the next 2 hours before we got to our hotel, I was writing. And John said, well, maybe this is a different book. Maybe just let it be what it's going to be. And so I just recognized that as a writer, and I believe I kind of had this voice inside me that said, I'm not good enough. So even if I'm writing, no one's going to want to read it's that insecurity that many of us carry. And my husband said something to me that really helped. He said, what if you just wrote it without the expectation that everyone's going to love it, but because you had to write it, because it deserved to be expressed? And that gave me a lot of freedom. That gave me the recognition that I don't have to accomplish a lot in writing except just to tell my truth, tell the story that's in front of me. I don't have to have some wisdom beyond myself because I'm just as messy and self-centered and goofy as everybody else. And so when I let go of that expectation, the words just would flow, and I would just start to write about small moments in life when I knew that spirit was guiding me.
I just love that. It's such a brilliant way to look at something. Say those words again. Write it because it deserves to be expressed. So powerful. It's brilliant. What a wonderful husband. I adore him too, even though I've never met him either.
He really is a very good man. Yeah. And it's interesting to be in partnership with somebody it's going to be 27 years, our wedding anniversary past July, but we've known each other for about 30 years. And he's just a really good soul. But the gift he gave me that day was, I could let go of, because Letter to Young Medium had already been published. And I'd gotten some really lovely responses, but I'd gotten, of course, like any writer, you get some negative ones too.
And that was your first book, Letter to a Young Medium.
Yeah, Letter to Young. And, even in that process, it was helpful because John helped me with that too. He said, don't pretend to be God. We already have a God and she doesn't need your help.
Yeah.
It was that clarity that all I can do is tell my stories, and there's a real freedom in that. I don't even have to tell people what to think of those stories, because I used to have this thing at the end after I tell the story. This is what you're supposed to get from it. This is what I meant. And John said, remove that crap. Just tell the story and let people own it. Let them have their own experience.
Yes.
And frankly, you are a storyteller.
Yeah.
I asked you about you with your writing, because, I like it when we have conversations that are more interactive, because it's really, it takes so much courage to be who you are and putting your voice out there the way you do.
Yeah.
So when you as a writer, what's the story that you need to tell? What you want to tell, but what's the story that you need to tell about you?
Eye-Opening Moments podcast are real-life stories of adversity, encounters, and perspectives. They are moments that can lift your spirits, give you some food for thought, or move you. For the introspective mind that likes to reflect, discover, and find solutions or meaning in a complex life, listen to Eye-Opening Moments podcasts.
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, there's so many. You see, I've had such an adventurous life, Brian. But I think what I really feel I need to express now is I want to write and have been creating research notes for this. A one-woman play, very much like Shirley Valentine, which I'm going to write and perform at the Edinburgh Festival. And it's only going to be a sort of 90-minute show, something like that, maybe 2 halves of 45 minutes. And I played Shirley Valentine once, I probably told you, and played 18 different characters on stage. And this play is something similar along those lines, where I play many different characters, because I did a lot of voice work and cartoon voices and things like that. So I'm quite good at mimicry. And but it's about, I can't quite decide what it's about, but it's definitely about the death of my brother, because that was a very tragic event for sure. But also, always alongside great tragedy comes great humor and great comedy and great laughter and wonderful moments of upliftment and joy. So it can't be it will never be a miserable play. It has to be something very uplifting, but very, very touching. And it's also going to involve the experiences I'm currently having with my mum, who we were chatting before we started this podcast. She's got some severe memory issues, for people that are listening. And again, with that incidents, it's a lot of, it's not sad, it's human challenges, for all of our family and for my mother. And also great hilarity within it. She finds it funny as well. So it's just this kind of human soup experience that we're all having. And I want to capture things like that. And maybe I'd like to flash back, Brian, to the things in my life that have happened that have been extraordinarily funny or very moving, or I've got so many stories about my claims to fame when I met various different famous people and things like that, and the funny things that happened. And I want to put some of that in. So it'll be like a little sprinkle of all kinds of different things, really. Yeah. I just need to start. That's the only thing I need to do, really. Like you did. You put pen to paper and you just started writing. And I love the advice that your husband, what's your husband's name?
John Bronis.
John, I love the advice he gave you there, to just begin and write what needs to be expressed, and don't be trying to write what you think people want to watch or see, because then you're trying to write to a framework, aren't you? Instead of writing from the feelings and the experiences. Yeah, so.
All there. I mean, even as you talked about it, notice how you started to visit small moments.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. And so we don't have to know what the book is until the book's done. That's part of the beauty, is the title of the book changed, so many times. It was the day I sent it to be published and got all that stuff finished. That's when I landed on that title.
Yeah.
And it had been so many different titles,
Right.
And so it's kind of fun to let the book tell you what it's meant to be called.
I love that. So you wrote little vignettes of different things from your life as well in a similar sort of way then.
Yeah. And I think the beauty of it is, it's like, there's one of the chapters, I recognize my story may make some people uncomfortable. I mean, I'm a gay man and I had some crazy experiences because I'm human. And
Yes.
then what I talked about was making out with the leather daddy at an act up in Washington, D.C. And it was like this kind of during the AIDS crisis. And just how this leather daddy, I went to kiss him at this kiss-in, and he pushed me back and he said, "You are the single worst kisser of my lifetime. I've never kissed a man that knows less how to make out than you." So he proceeded to spend 2 hours teaching me how to kiss.
Oh, I like leather daddy.
It turned out that his partner died 3 weeks prior to that. And that's why I was asked to sit and actually be his partner at that event.
Right.
It's every moment to me is filled with humor and grief.
Yes.
And it takes a certain amount of willingness to let the feelings of grief be there with the humor.
Yes.
I realized for myself with my writing, because there's a way in which I used to write in a way that was kind of demeaning to grief because I wasn't comfortable with my own grief. I would go to humor as a way to protect myself.
Right.
And I still do that, if I'm being honest, but I like that there's a mixture of the vulnerability with the humor.
Yeah.
Just by telling the truth,
Yeah.
if that makes sense,
Yeah, that does make sense. That makes really good sense. I was thinking the other day, because I was thinking, well, how can I bring it all together, my stories? How can I bring it all together? And I was thinking, gosh, there was a time when I was teaching all my students in a class on a Zoom call. And, when you do a Zoom call, there's so many little squares on the screen. And every few minutes, I'd set them a little exercise, and then I'd just pause, and then I'd run off to my brother who was really ill, doing something crazy downstairs because he had a brain tumor. He didn't really know what he was doing, and trying to cope with that. And then coming back in and going, "Hello, everyone. Yes, and here we are back again." And all was really calm. And then the next, about another 20 minutes to go by, and then I just put it on pause and put my camera off, and then run off and do something. So it was just crazy. And I'm thinking that might be quite a good way to set the play up with a backdrop of all these different squares where it's almost like a farce. You're being here in front of this Zoom, but then you have to run off and deal with life's issues, and people see you as this calm, your life looks marvelous. What could possibly be wrong with Anne? And really behind the scenes, there's so much going on. And it's the same for you, Brian, I'm sure.
I think that's a beautiful way you described it. I mean, I want to see this play. I mean,
I do as well.
No, I mean, because I think the beauty of it is, when we call ourselves fancy mediums and we're doing this really beautiful work, which is really miraculous. And it's still pretty inexplicable for me to explain the miracle of the work of mediumship.
Yeah.
Also, even though I really believe and know today that, we're spirits in the body and, we can be fancy with our beliefs and what have you. When a loved one dies, it still hurts.
Oh, yeah.
Of the lesson of being human, not even a little bit. And I think that's part of the beauty of writing is come to recognize we're all in the river together.
Yeah.
And when I imagine that I'm on the side of that river, I'm not very helpful to anybody because I'm imagining that I'm somehow separate from the experience of being human. And if you've suffered and gone through times where you've been in profound grief, I feel like we have so much to offer others when we honor them.
Yeah.
Let those feelings guide us instead of imagining them just being part of the past. Because I feel like my grief speaks to me today and has so much to offer me today as it did when, I first experienced loss. And so how about for you? When you think about, that's a powerful moment, actually. You have these memories of caring for your brother, and then you can be the teacher.
Yeah.
And, that's really profound, isn't it? I like that you're holding both, and yet you did both really well. I'm sure that's part of the beauty of it.
Yeah. It was fun. They were a new bunch of students at the time, a new class of students, and I don't speak about my personal life or what's going on, especially something so sensitive that was going on at that time to a bunch of strangers. So there was no way that they would have known what was going on. But yeah, it was It was easy enough to hold both spaces, actually, and turn up for both things that were going on. And I think we do that, don't we? As human beings, we don't tell everyone everything. We're quite private, I think, as human beings, very, very private. Don't let people know a lot of things that go on behind the scenes. And yeah, interesting. What I found, though, is I don't know if you found this, Brian, but I found people are actually really lovely. People are kind. People are thoughtful, generous, funny. It's only when we're under the greatest stress and duress when our worst selves come out, because my worst self appears several times a week, let me tell you. But on the whole, people are so nice. So when you are suffering something terrible in your life, people rally around you and they pick you up and they support you and they're so kind. Don't you find?
I think that has been a great gift of the last 2 years for me with having gone down this journey with health issues. Although I'll be honest, it's been hard for me to receive. It's comfortable to let people love me back. And so I think there's an aspect of mediumship where you're given a lot of authority with that work and the sense of you're the communicator. Even though the information's not coming from you, there's a sense of authority or expectation we can create for ourselves. And I think there's a great gift I've been given with this health journey that it just reminds me that part of the dance of this life is that we have to let people love us back. And you said it beautifully. Whenever we're under our greatest stress, we fail people because we do. And if anybody's telling the worst story about your worst moment, you could seem like the worst person on the planet.
Yeah.
So if anyone's telling the most lovely story about you, your most lovely moment, you could sound like the most lovely person. And I've just accepted that I'm neither. I'm really both. I'm complicated, like all of us. And so creating that expectation of perfection is really, it only wounds us to have that expectation, because then we have to pretend a lot with the world and that we're of it. And I think with the beauty of writing is that you can reveal to yourself too, that you're just deeply human and that you make as many mistakes as everybody else. And that there's no villain. It's hard to have a villain in the story when you're writing. It's really beautiful. You start to see that you're the villain in some of the stories.
Yes.
It's not as simple as I thought it would be, and so my stories, even with my family, have become so much more complicated, where it's no longer my mom was not a great mom, or, those kinds of stories I used to tell myself. Now she's a complicated woman in a world that didn't allow her to be a complicated woman. And so it's just fascinating, as you all these stories, you see who you are in those stories too. It reveals a lot. It's beautiful that way.
Why do you think, Brian, you find it hard to let people love you? Where do you think that comes from?
I think we all have our different ways of coping with our experience of being human, but I think being a gay man and coming out during the AIDS crisis, there was this feeling that who I was unacceptable, and who I was inherently in opposition to what a good person would be, if you will. And so I think there's still an unconscious part of me that I have to grapple with. That belief that I'm worthy of the love I try to offer. And I think many of us struggle with that. But I also think our friendships can suffer if we don't let people care for us when we're vulnerable. There's a great balance that we offer each other, if that makes sense. I'm learning a lot. I think I've harmed friendships, frankly, by not letting people in and not letting close friends see me or be there for me. And so I think the mediumship is fascinating because, in mediumship, you're honoring the truth and the lived experience of a spirit. And at some point, that grace that is going through you also touches you. And at some point, you look in the mirror and you think, okay, I'm no longer okay with hating this person I see every day. I've got to find a different relationship with this person.
Yeah.
So there's got to be a softer way to tell my own story to myself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it really does make sense. I've been thinking a lot in the last week or two, especially about beliefs I've carried since I was a child and how they've never served me, but yet they've defined me because I believed in them. And we were speaking, there's two I can think of. Let me think. We were speaking before this program began. We were just having a general chat, weren't we? It was lovely. And I was saying that one of the things my mother used to say to me as a child was that you are, she's Irish, my mother, by the way, you are plain. You're not, what did she say? You're no great beauty. You're plain, but pleasing. And my whole life I thought, oh, okay, so I'm not beautiful, but I'm quite plain, but I'm pleasing. So that's a good thing. And that defined me for a long time. And another thing I was thinking about when I was out with the dog last week was there's this rhyme, which is Monday's child is fair of face. Tuesday's child is full of grace. Wednesday's child is this and that. Thursday's child, I was born on a Thursday, has far to go. And I was like, what? Well, I got the Duff line in that poem, like Thursday's child has far to go. Maybe that's my lot in life. I've got to really slog hard and I'm never going to really get there and everyone's going to get there before me. And in fact, that is actually what's happened in my life. But isn't it funny how these things, we carry them through, but they're not true. None of them are true. And so I think we have to be really careful what we say to people in this world. Be careful with our words. They are very powerful.
Beautiful. But I also feel the language we use with ourselves can make the kind of cruelty the world offers normal. In other words, the cruelty it's kind of the idea that no one will harm me more than myself. And so it's like, I almost feel as if the more kind I've been to myself, the more relationships change in my life. Some people they just can't fit the new energy. I hate to get so goofy about the energy piece because we can almost make that sound not human, but it's like that energy of self-love. It doesn't align with the relationship you've created with someone else, and they no longer belong in our life. And it's often not dramatic, like a dramatic upheaval and a dramatic goodbye. It's more our lives find a way to pull away from one another because that person no longer aligns with the energy I'm creating for myself.
Yes.
Have you found that to be true for you?
Yeah, very much so. There's been people that have suddenly spiraled away out of existence, and where you think they're going to be around for quite some time, and then suddenly they're just not there. They've been removed by events, and sometimes it's a really hard separation. The soul feels so full of grief. Like, what is that about? I thought this was a thing, and then you realize, when you look back, no, you were going off in completely the wrong direction. You have been recalibrated to the correct road, like a sat nav. And it had to be that way because you were just going to go off in completely the wrong direction. So, yeah, it has happened.
But I honor that with your mom. Do you feel that that's what your mom thought of herself? Was her only way that she could story you or see you? That's just what I want.
Yeah,
I hope that's okay to ask.
Of course it's okay. You can ask me anything. I don't mind. Yes. Well, it's interesting because as I've sat with her and I've had the benefit of visiting her much more often than I normally would have done. And through that sitting with her of a night time, just having a glass of wine and talking about the day. And she talks about the olden days a lot. And she's talked a lot about her parents, and I knew lots and lots of the stories, but the more she speaks about it, the more I think, my goodness, my mother was a damaged lady by her parents, who probably damaged in their turn, and she's copied some of the phrasing that she learned from her mother. And I believe that phrase, you're plain but pleasing, is something that comes from her mum, and she's learned to say it to me. I remember picking up a letter that had been written by my grandmother. So that's my mother's mum. And she was talking about one of her daughters. So that would be my auntie, my mother's sister. And in this lovely letter, my grandmother has this beautiful writing. It's so stylish, her writing. But she's saying very mean things about her daughter, saying something. She would be Irish as well. So I'm going to do the accent just for the benefit of it. Or do you look at Joan there? Joan was her daughter. Joan going along the road there in that little hat with her pinched little face. What does she look like? Doesn't she look a sight in that hat? And I was just thinking, Joan was one of the most beautiful, stunning women. And I bet she looked beautiful in her little hat. And I bet she felt lovely in her little hat. And there's her mother writing down words to send to somebody else, being so mean and nasty about it. I mean, it's light, small little mean and nasty stuff, but needless. And I just found that really sad. And I think my mother must have listened to those kind of phrases all her life and that sort of behavior all her life. And then you can't help but copy because we're human beings and we imitate so that we fit in. That's part of human nature, is it not? Psychology and all that. And so when you start to have a look at why we behave the way we do, then we understand the human experience so much more. It's nothing to do with my mother's soul. My mother would give you the coat off her back. She still, at the age of 90, makes me a hot water bottle and puts it in my bed with my pajamas wrapped around it. I'm 57, 58. Yeah, so there's a lot of love there. But that love is not easily expressed. It's not spoken. It's not shown physically, but it's demonstrated in other ways. And I think because we have to, I don't know, I think my mum always used to say to me, "Oh, you'll never know my true value until you see my empty chair." And, it's probably true. And I think about it because she's got a chair in the kitchen where she sits every single day, all day long, reading a paper, eating her lunch, doing this, looking at the clock, looking to see who's at the front door, going back to the chair. And I think, God, and I sit there sometimes. And actually, I sent a message to my friend Fraser when I was sitting in the kitchen. My mother had gone up to bed when I was last in Ireland, and I sent him a message and I said, gosh, my mother's voice has been so loud all my life. She's had loud opinions, loud expressions, loud vocally telling me what she thought always. And I said, and very soon there's going to be so silent in this kitchen. And that was a really big moment for me. I thought, my goodness, it's coming to an end, and there's such a sadness within all of it, isn't there? The human experience. But I'm so happy to be experiencing this softer side of her at the end of her days. Yeah.
That's so beautiful. If we just take that in, you're a writer. That's even like the image of the empty chair in the kitchen. And, how many of us can relate to watching our mothers change and be at a mom go through that journey of, more prolonged decline. It's a painful thing to recognize the mother will see in 2 weeks or a month will be different. One of the things I really believe about mediumship is that, we focus on the evidence, which is beautiful and important to me. But I often wonder if we can think of our work more systemically, because we're not really, when we're connecting with someone's mother, we can connect with her as a soul, right, as an individual. But there's sometimes power in allowing her loved ones to come and speak, even about her and about your relationship, in an evidential fashion, right? Where her mother or her sister would come through and, identify who they are, show you what but it's an interesting thing when I come to allow mediumship kind of work the same way I did as a family therapist. in a more systemic way where it's not just all about the individual, because we're so impacted by the families that we come from. We can't really separate who we are from our origin story or from the people in that story and their pain and their joy and the things that they were asked to overcome. Like, for example, I didn't know that we were Jewish on the mom's side of the family until right before my mom died. And it was actually her brother who told me at a restaurant and popped this whole booklet in front of me about all of our Jewish relatives. And then I had a genetic test, and indeed we are Ashkenazi Jews on my mother's side, or part of my mother's side. And it was so fascinating to recognize the lengths to which her family went to hide that. And so that just reveals so much about who she was and her identity, how she was told from the time she was a child that part of who she was unacceptable. And so when me telling her that I was gay, why she would be protective and have a very difficult time with that, because it's not so different from her experience. Feeling like her identity, part of her identity would never be accepted in this world. And so it's just fascinating. I just think, not to get too dramatic about it, but I think when we think of mediumship in a systemic way, first of all, I think it opens the door to new kinds of evidence. But secondly, I think it gives us a different way to understand our parents and understand the people in our family.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. Say more about mediumship in a systemic way, because I don't think I'm quite understanding what that means.
Well, for example, when I work with people now, if I'm connecting with someone's mother, for example, I'll see the grandparents typically on both sides of the family. And I'll just acknowledge it. Sometimes they'll actually directly speak, and I'll acknowledge to the client what they look like. Is typically what I do. And I try to be as specific as possible so that they can ground that evidence it's sincere. And sometimes a grandfather will actually will sit in a chair with the father. Let's say if the father was known, maybe the father abandoned the family or what have you. And so this person felt that their mother's father became more of a father to them. And so there'll be ways in the visual so when I'm working with the client, I could say, okay, I'm connecting with your mother, and just to acknowledge her mother, your mother looked this way, but her mother looked this way and her father looked this way. And she was closer with her father, and they, so some of the challenges that your mom experienced, she transferred onto you, and she just wants to acknowledge that. Does that make sense? It's more specific.
Yeah. So you're understanding who you are. So your recipient is understanding more who they are because of their lineage and because of the behavior of those that were before them. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the lineage of women, as women have gained more rights in a legal way, it doesn't mean that women have gained access to the male dominated world in a real way. The legal, we can have a law in the books, but the real lived experience and equality doesn't just happen because we make up a law about it. So you think of the generations of women in our history and in your ancestry, it's fascinating to think about, the ways in which women, like my mother, were impacted by sexism. You're not allowed to be a mother with mental health issues. You just have to be happy about being a mother and working full time. So she wasn't given, there was no room for her to have her real experience in the room. She was just told she had to be happy about it and to be joyful and grateful that she was a mother and a full-time, worker. And you think about the unreasonableness of that. That's ridiculous. Yeah. But her lived experience was, her real emotional, true experience was seldom allowed to be in the room. That destroys people.
Yeah.
So we start to understand that our ancestry is more complicated. Just as we always hope that people will see our complexity and give us compassion when we're imperfect, because we all are. It's fascinating when we give that to our relatives, because then they have a completely different story in our minds. They hold a very different space. So that's kind of talk to me in 5 years, I'll have a completely different belief maybe at that point.
Yeah.
I think it's really an interesting thing to recognize that we're all part of a family and we're all part of an ancestral lineage. And I just think it's powerful to let our mediumship speak back to that, but in a real way. We don't want those experiences to be out of the world of evidence. And we don't want those experiences to be manufactured or generalized. It's more that we really can depend on the evidence to take us further. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it really, really does make sense. Are you doing a lot of one-on-one readings at the moment? Do you demonstrate? How is your mediumship working for you?
Yeah, I like to do demonstrations. In fact, I was just going to say, if you ever wanted to, I'd be honored, for you and I could do an actual session with you and just kind of acknowledge what that looks like, so it doesn't sound so theoretical. It's really fun to put the meat on the bones of that. But anyway, because of my health, the way it's been the last couple of years, I was diagnosed with pernicious anemia, it sounds goofy, but it's a lovely diagnosis to get, in the sense that once you start doing shots, you start to pretty much get like all the things back that you were losing. It's pretty magical. I mean, I look like I had Parkinson's 2.5 months ago. I was walking with a cane, I had tremors. I was just, very pulling away from the world. And now, having been on these shots for a while, I'm just coming back to life. It's really magical. So I'm starting to work and starting to do one-on-one readings again. I look forward to doing demonstrations again. But I'm a big believer that the belief system of the medium guides the evidence. Whatever you value is what you'll allow to come through, if you will.
Yeah.
It's like mediumship is like an instrument. And so are instruments to offer more than what we imagined, and allow more to be in the room than we would ever have imagined. And I think that's kind of powerful.
I think that's really, really powerful. I would absolutely love to do a demonstration of mediumship with you, Brian. So we'll definitely organize that. That'd be fabulous.
Yeah.
And I was very interested in my own mediumship last night, without blowing my own trumpet. But
No. You have to, let's pause for a moment on that. I think so. It took you many years to get to this point in your mediumship, and a lot of hard work.
Yes.
And the fact that you're good at it and the fact that you're effective it's just a mirror, isn't it? Your commitment to this work, and also all the pain and challenges and gratitude and growth that you've gone through in your life. So,
Thank
sorry to interrupt you on that little bit.
Oh,
anyways,
that's nice. Yeah, no, thank you. You're honoring my journey there, which is, you're absolutely right. It's really, really important to honor that. And I should honor that in myself a lot more, actually, because what I do on a Tuesday night is something called the mediumship hour. It's 1 hour. I demonstrate every single Tuesday of the year, apart from, I think I take 2 weeks off at Christmas. Occasionally, there have been Tuesdays where I can't do it, and my friend Leslie Malone will pitch in and do it for me. But I'm now starting to, it's been going for 3 years now, Brian, and I'm now starting to invite other mediums onto it. It's a free event. Anybody can come from all over the world. It's 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. UK time zone. And it's just a way of serving the spirit world and giving something out to people who may really need a message or may just be curious about mediumship. And also, it's got the added bonus of being a beautiful playing field for my mediumship, whereby I'm not in a spiritualist church. I don't have to do things in a certain way because it's mine. I can do what I like. But basically what I do is I do mediumship for half an hour and then someone else does. But coming full circle on it, last night, so I was working with my mediumship, and it was such a profound evening. And there have been many, many evenings with this mediumship hour where I've hidden away. I'm not telling anyone it's on. They can come if they find out. They can just turn up. That's okay. Let me just see how it goes. And I've sort of felt my way forward with it. And now I'm starting to advertise it and made my lovely little graphics and things. And I put them all out there a couple of weeks ago. And what I noticed yesterday was, as I have learned to attune to the spirit world, they have learned to attune to me also. And I hadn't really considered that before. I'd always thought it was something I had to do. But of course, it's a two-way thing. We're trying to get that beautiful attunement in place, and the trust and the energetic connection there. And last night it just worked so beautifully. I was able to give some really lovely messages to people, safe in the knowledge that I knew what the spirit world were giving me. And I was insistent, no, it's this way, this is what's happening. And then it's I might as well tell you the story, mightn't I? Let me just tell you the story. It's easier. Everyone would be like, what's she got about? So in a nutshell, there was let me just say, there was a gentleman in the spirit world who passed away from something like a leukemia or something like that in his 40s. And I said, oh, you're his sister. He tells me you're his sister. Yes, I am, said the recipient. And I said, he shows me this piece of string with blobs on it, little circular blobs, because that's how it comes in, doesn't it? It doesn't immediately come in as a necklace or a set of beads. It comes in like what is this thing I'm looking at or I'm being shown? And then I knew it's to do with prayers. Oh, it's something to do with prayer beads. He gives this to you. And she said, no, he's never given me anything like that. I said, well, he's showing me this thing. Maybe it must be a mala beads or rosary beads or a necklace. Did he ever give you a pearl necklace? No. I said, okay, but he keeps showing it to me. She said, I don't know what it is. And I said, I appreciate you don't know what it is, but I can't let it go. He keeps showing it to me again and again and again. It's a piece of string with blobs on it. I believe it's a prayer beads. It's definitely for prayer, and it connects the two of you together. So what is this? Why is he showing it to me? And she said, well, maybe it's the rosary beads I put in his hands in his coffin. And I said, oh, so you gave it to him. He didn't give it to you, but that's what connects you, these prayer beads. And it was a beautiful piece of mediumship because the spirit person was, definite about what they were showing. I was definite about what I was receiving and what I was giving. And the recipient was trying to work it out in her own mind. And finally, we made the connection. And after that, the information just started to flow. But I thought, how beautiful mediumship is when it works so wonderfully to give beautiful, beautiful, beautiful evidence. There was another one last night where I said to this lady, your friend in the spirit world is showing me a wishing well. And I said, she's showing me tarot cards. Yes, we used to read tarot cards together. I said, and I know I've read tarot cards for many years, and the wishing well does not exist on any tarot card in the Rider-Waite tarot pack. But she shows me this wishing well, and I know you drop coins together into this wishing well in a prayerful way. And she said, before she died, that's what we did. We dropped coins into a wishing well. Isn't that amazing? And I just thought, wow, what beautiful evidence from spirit that I'm honored to be able to bring forward and trust and deliver.
Yes.
And I'm just so excited about mediumship and how the spirit world are working with me. Because as you know, Brian, mediumship goes up and down and round the houses and back. You go back 25 steps and forward 4 and back 35 and forward 7.
It's messy as we are.
It's a journey, mediumship is. But I guess my whole thing is I realized how hard the spirit world are working with me yesterday. And I found that so beautiful.
But also, what you did, that's, I think the hardest thing for me in mediumship is that you trusted the information.
Yeah.
Even as somebody was saying, no. There's a thing about the work that is so transformational when you stand by the spirit and it's no longer the attachment to approval or to accomplishment.
Yes.
Almost like that, just that little voice that says, I need to prove to people that I'm a medium. I need to prove to people I'm good, or all that nonsense. It's like that all of a sudden quiets. And then there's this other space for the work where it's like, some people don't like the fact that I use the word surrender because it can be kind of a goopy term, and I totally honor that.
Yeah.
But it feels that way to me, that where I'm letting go of I'm recognizing this isn't about me in that moment. And I'm letting go enough of me to stand by the spirit. And those are magical moments in the work. And there's just days where I'm not as good at that as I am on other days.
Yes. Same
because
here.
of what I went through. But look what you did. You allowed a spirit to come through you and offer a memory and a connection that person will never forget.
Yeah.
Isn't that magical? It's hard to explain how powerful it is to be used in that way, to allow a message to be played through, to allow a moment to be acknowledged through us. Yeah. It's really profound. So can I ask you, Did you feel the validation from the spirit before the client?
How do you mean?
Did you feel before the client said, yes, that this is the wishing well, memory of dropping those coins in before my friend died?
Yeah.
Didn't you know that that was accurate before the client ever said a word?
Oh, yeah.
Isn't that the craziest thing?
It's
Like
the
that
craziest thing.
always there was spirit. You can always feel, to me, I feel like I'm in the river or I'm moving out of the river.
Yeah.
And when you're in that river, it's kind of in that flow, and you can kind of feel like I'm honoring the message. I'm staying true to what's bring me. So you knew before the ever came to.
It's funny, isn't it? Because I saw the tarot cards and I saw the wishing well on the tarot cards, and I knew it was nothing to do with the tarot. So I was like, there's this wishing well. It's really important. It's jumping out at me. So this is information I need to now deliver to you. So she's showing me this wishing well, and I believe you dropped coins in it. It was really extraordinary. And the week before that, I'd recently attended a course by the fantastic Paul Jacobs at the Arthur Finney College. And it was I must write to Paul Jacobs actually and tell him how brilliant that course was and how it's really benefited me and all the spirit people that work through me and the clients and everything. But I attended this course, and one of the things he said to me that Gordon Higginson used to say was, if you can see a picture frame in your mind's eye, then you can see what's in it, because it's in the picture. If you can see the picture frame, you can see what's in the picture. So I thought, that's fascinating, that is. So I tried it out 2 weeks ago. The spirit people gave me, I was working with this lady, this living lady, and I said, your sisters here. There's 3 sisters actually that stand together. And I said, and there's a photograph that exists of the 3 of them sitting together. And she said, yes, I've just been looking at it before I came on. It's at the back of the room. And I said, and I know in that picture that they must be sitting against a white wooden slatted wood or tongue and groove or something like this. It's like wooden panels. And she said, yes, that's exactly what's behind them. So I was like, excellent. I put that into practice and it worked really well, because that's what Paul Jacobs was saying. That's where the evidence is. Look deeper for the evidence.
I love that.
It's great, isn't it, Brian? Doesn't it excite you about mediumship? You're like, I could try all these lovely things.
Yeah, and we're never done. It's and actually next time, just for fun, when you're working with a client, when you're working with one of their parents in spirit, just imagine that the father that's there, that his parents are with him.
That's great. I love this way that you're working.
And just see what happens. And then just imagine all the animals that were important to the father or to the person that you're working with, just the client. I don't feel like spirit ever tries to trick us.
No.
I just know for myself, when I'm doubting myself or whatever it is, that doubt is real to me. And I've made that real and bring it into the work because, I'm human. But it's a powerful thing to have doubt, but still trust.
It really is.
It's not true for me. I can doubt myself. I can doubt even mediumship. And yet I can still trust the experience of the work, even in my doubt. And I just think if we can tell each other that, then there's not the magical shore that we land on where we have no doubt, because that's just not true. I don't think that's real.
It's not. And you're right. And when I think about my journey through the mediumship hour, I just started with myself and Leslie Malone and Tyrone Cusack. We were all good mediums at the time, but we didn't tell that many people about it. We were just sort of experimenting. And also we were used to demonstrating in spiritualist churches and events and venues. And so doing it on Zoom is very, very different. We had to learn a kind of adapt our mediumship a little bit to the Zoom. But
what did just to ask real quick, what did you adapt, if you don't mind? What are some things that you did to adapt to that environment?
Yeah.
I would appreciate that, because I think that's true. It's kind of powerful.
I'll come on to that in a second, but I'll just finish what I was going to say initially, which was that crippling doubt at the beginning. And I used to pitch up every Tuesday and I'd have to run to the loo 1,000 times before I began. And I used to feel sick thinking, what am I doing? What am I doing? Oh my gosh. And then the minute you step into the power of your own soul and the power of the spirit world, you're off and you're okay. Some were not so great. Some of those evenings were difficult. Recipients can be tricky sometimes. Spirit connections can be hard to cement sometimes. And I stumbled and staggered through a lot of those evenings, but I kept going back the next Tuesday. I kept going back. And I'm so glad I didn't stop doing it, because what I'm trying to say to the people listening is that lovely experience I had yesterday with the rosary beads or the wishing well, I didn't start that way. I started with tiny little pieces of evidence, little bits that were just as valid and important, but my confidence in my own ability was not really there. But it is coming now. It's coming just through turning up and doing it, and just sort of being, I don't swear on this podcast, but what can I think of a different phrase for what I'm trying to say? Very focus-minded. Yeah, that's what I was trying to do. So to adapt to Zoom, which is what your question was, I had to understand a little bit more about people's behavior, because people sit in front of a computer, they think they're just in front of the television. So they pitch up, they want to eat their dinner, they want to put the dog on the lap, they want to eat their soup. Some people are in bed in their night dresses. Some people are just wandering about in the garden with their phone and their backgrounds are wafting up and down. Some people are driving, just wandering.
Yes.
And then some people would unmute because you got a message for them. Their husband would be sitting next to them watching the telly, and you're trying to give them the message over the husband or the wife or the other person listening to music or watching the telly. It's crazy. So initially I found all that really rude. But what I've come to understand, coming back to what we're saying, is it's the human experience. This is what we are. We're messy human beings. This is, we're not very, don't tidy us up and dust us down. Life would be very boring. But how I did adapt, though, was I did set some rules and regulations in the mediumship hour. So I say to everybody, it's 1 hour of mediumship. I want you have to be in here for this hour. Keep your camera on. And the reason I want the camera on is so that people are engaged, so we can see people's faces. We know that they're listening, and energetically it helps us connect. And sometimes you'd give a message to someone and they'd have all the black screens with just their name at the bottom, and nobody was saying yes or no, and you couldn't see if they were behind the screen or whether they'd wandered off to go and get some Weetabix from the kitchen. I don't know. And the other thing I said was, don't put your pets on your lap, because we love pets. We're all pet lovers, adore cats, dogs, horses, house pigs, whatever you've got, hamsters, rabbits. They're all welcome. But if you put your dog or cat on your lap, it's very distracting because there's a lot of movement going on in the screen. Same, I say to people, don't wander around. Just keep in one place. So things like that. We put some basic rules in place. And for us as mediums also, we put rules in place. We finish at 8:00 because we found, because you know what it's like when you've got a good link and you don't want to stop it and you're carrying on. It's 8:05. Oh, I'll just say a little bit more about this. It's 8:10. And people are starting to leave the room. And it's not fair on them because they only signed up to come in for the hour. So we tried to finish on time, understand people's behavior, put some rules and regulations in place. And how else did I adapt? I still, if you demonstrate in a venue, you give out your initial information and you feel drawn. I'm drawn in this way, or I feel I'm in this direction, and it must be somebody here along this line on the right. But on Zoom, you can't really do that, especially if there's 2 or 3, if you're lucky and you've got to flick through some pages because there's more than 12 people there. So sometimes it works. I can just look at those screens and I say, right, Mrs. Smith, can you unmute? I really need to come to you. Sometimes that works. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you say one square and it's the person just underneath in the square beneath. So there's that. How else did I adapt? All kinds of different ways, really. Does that help at all, Brian?
It does. No, I think it's beautiful. I mean, it's as a medium, I'm just still a believer that mediumship's about vulnerability. And so we have to have the setting be set up in a way that allows us to be vulnerable. Or I can't really trust myself in the work fully. I won't take the risk to be vulnerable, because the very things you're mentioning, it's so funny to hear you talk about those examples because yes. But I'm also amazed that some of the judgment I had about something like being a barrier or not working as well, or, some of those belief systems I had have all been proven to just not be the case. So I love that. The spirit is always bigger than my barriers that my mind creates or makes up.
Yeah.
It was a lovely person that leads this group for mothers who have had children die. And it's quite a large group. And when you're doing work in that group, they have about 6 mediums normally and divided in 3 different rooms or what have you. And I was freaked out the first time I went. Well, second time I went, third time I went. But it took time for me. And so kind of trusting the time, trusting that something that's uncomfortable now won't be.
Yeah.
There's a moment where it won't be.
Yeah.
And just allowing yourself to be uncomfortable, but knowing that that's temporary.
Yeah.
I just thought your examples I thought your guidance was great. Anyway, I didn't know you were doing that on Tuesday nights. So you were actually very subtle about that. So that's something I'm going to make sure I attend.
Oh yeah, come along. You're so welcome. You can attend, and those listening can attend. Man, don't kill me if it doesn't go quite so well. It's just how it is.
I think you're just acknowledging the beauty of it that, but again, it's that same thing. If people only tell the story about our best reading.
Yeah.
Or where I always feel like that's not really who I am as a medium. I'm somewhere like everyone else. I'm on my path.
We pitch up to serve, don't we, Brian? We pitch up with the greatest love and with the greatest will and in the world to do the best that we can, and that's all we can do in the moment. So
I love that.
Yeah. So, Brian, your book, where can people buy it? Lessons of the Empty Chairs. There's more than one chair. Yes.
So I think I'm embarrassed to say I think I called it the Lessons of the Empty Chair when it really should have been Empty Chair or the Lesson of the Empty Chair. But I debate it. I'm still debating the same book.
It's great. It's a great title.
Thanks so much. But it's on Amazon. And that's the main place to get it. And the really thing I'll just end with is this really lovely person, Jeffrey John, who's also a medium. He's really a beautiful medium and just a beautiful person, frankly. He agreed to be the voice and narration for the book. I just think he did such a beautiful job. And so his way of interpreting the book has meant a lot to me because he's frankly brought more nuance out of it than I intended as a writer, if you know what I mean. So I think it's more interesting and better, if you will.
Yeah.
But I appreciate that folks can just listen to a chapter in that form and the chapter is not connected. So if let's say you're in chapter 1 and you think it's dreadful because it's when I'm on a amusement park ride at the age of 13 and it winds up being one of my first experiences with spirit. So let's say that's not your story because it's a little bit wild of a story. You can be like, I'm over this story and you can go right to the next one. And there, you don't need to hear what's in number 1 to get to number 2 if you will.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. That's really good. It's sort of browsing book. You can browse through your various stories. Jeffrey John has been on this podcast literally 2 weeks ago. Unleash the Power of Mediumship, I think it was called. And he was brilliant. He was such a wonderful guest. And I hadn't realized that he'd voiced your book for you because you have some beautiful clips on your Facebook page of him narrating your book. And he does do it such justice and he's got such a beautiful voice. So how fabulous is that?
Yeah, but he just did such a lovely job. Yeah, I can't, that's kind of the beauty of all things in life. We don't really accomplish anything on our own, do we? It's always a group that accomplishes. It's kind of one thing, but Anne, it's been so lovely connecting with you, and I'd love a chance to just interview you sometime. So I'm going to create a podcast. What you can interview you, and you think I'm kidding? I'm actually not.
Okay,
but
cool.
If you're open to that sometime,
I would love to. Yeah, absolutely. That would be really great. Yeah, you can get all my deep dark secrets out of me, no problem. I'm an open book too.
Isn't that great? I think that's really a blessing, isn't it? As we get to a point in life where there's nothing to hide from anymore. It's kind of ridiculous, isn't it?
Yeah, it is miraculous. It is really good. It's great not to be too caught up in being the human being. And I think this is a nice way to finish, perhaps, where we've been talking about the soul expression. Your husband, John, was saying, write what needs to be expressed through your book. And I think in life, just do what needs to be expressed. Walk in the way that you need to express yourself in this world. And don't be looking over your shoulder about what they're doing over there, but walk your path. Your path is beautiful. It's all there for you, and it's powerful, and it's fun.
Yes. And, you think about the play you're writing, that you're going to write, your one woman show that you're writing. No one can, if you think about we have billions of people on the planet, but no one can write that play but you.
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing? And I think that's what makes mediumship so powerful and amazing. There's never going to be one spirit that will be exactly like the next one you communicate with. I just think that's magical. Anyway, it's lovely seeing you again, Ian.
Totally magical. Brian, I've so enjoyed our chat. Thank you so much for coming on again. It's just always great spending time in your company, and hopefully we'll get a chance to do it again another time, but we will demonstrate first.
I can't wait.
Wonderful. Yeah. Thank you so much, Brian.
Thank you, love.
I hope you have enjoyed this episode with my fabulous guest and very good friend, Brian E. Bowles. Isn't he just marvellous? I love listening to Brian. He holds you in a space with such care and such compassion. He's a remarkable individual. He really, really is. So easy to talk to, and he's so understanding of other people's journeys. Brian's latest book, The Lessons of the Empty Chair, is available now on Amazon, as are his other books, Letter to a Young Medium and Halfway Through the Woods. I highly recommend that you purchase all three, because Brian has this remarkable writing talent and his writing is profoundly touching. I know you're going to love them all. As in every episode of the Psychic Matters podcast, there are show notes available on my website, annetheato.com, and look for the podcast tab. That's ANNTHEATO.com. And you can go there and you can pick up all the URLs and links regarding Brian's episode on there, which will take you directly to him across the internet, and it's the place to find out where to purchase his books, etc., etc. I'll be back in 2 weeks' time with another exciting episode. Until then, my name is Anne Theato, and thank you for listening to Psychic Matters.